beneath the ocean floor, where everything seems to be nothing more than silent mud and darkness, something else was discovered. Another surface of water, not an ice lake, not a mirage, but a layer of liquid denser than seawater, lying still like a buried lake, entombed beneath the sea itself. Stranger still is the boundary between the two worlds, sharp as glass, reflecting light, and lethal to any creature that touches it. Fish, crabs, sea snakes, they all rush in as if pulled, then go motionless. Forever. It wasn't made to be discovered. It exists to force a question: if even within the ocean there are lakes that cannot be touched, then how many things down there never wanted to be found at all? The mirror at the bottom of the ocean. In June 1985, as the DSV Alvin descended slowly toward the floor of the Gulf of Mexico, the research team on board expected the usual layers of sediment, perhaps a few deep-sea creatures, or a rare geological fracture. What they didn't expect was a perfect mirror. At a depth of over 1,000 meters, right in the middle of cold, lifeless mud and rock, a smooth ribbon of liquid shimmered like it had been laid with silver leaf. At first, they assumed it was an optical illusion, just a trick of light refracting off the sub's lamps. But as the sub approached the boundary, every sensor began to spike erratically. The sonar bounced back sharply, as if there were a wall right in front of them, not of stone, not of metal, but of liquid. Water, but not like any water they had ever seen. Dr. Erich Cordes, an oceanographer who would join later dives, once described it as looking into a lake in the middle of the sea. The only thing missing was your reflection. A layer of liquid suspended within another, yet they didn't mix, didn't blur, didn't dissolve, almost as if the ocean had carved out a second world inside itself. To science, it was a paradox. To those who saw it, it was nearly supernatural. A lake that doesn't sink, a doorway that doesn't open. And from that moment on, the deep ocean was no longer just water and mud. It was something else entirely. The water that kills everything. Smooth as glass, still as a mirror, but beneath that perfect surface lies no peace. It's a trap, a brine pool so toxic it could kill an entire corner of the ocean. What's inside these pools isn't like any water known to science. It's a dense mixture of mineral salts, methane, and hydrogen sulfide, a poisonous gas usually found in mine shafts or rotting corpses. The salinity can reach 4 to 8 times that of normal seawater. In some zones, it's so saturated that not even a single grain of salt can dissolve further. Footage from remotely operated cameras captured eerie, unsettling scenes: a sailfin fish drifting slightly into the brine, then convulsing violently within seconds, before falling still motionless at the edge. A sea snake glided near the surface, whether from curiosity or mistake. No one knows, and met the same end. No sound, no blood, no struggle, just life switching off, as if someone had flicked a hidden kill switch. Around the rim of the pool, corpses of sea creatures form a ghostly outline, like the burnt edge of a pond from hell. Scientists call it plainly the death ring. No predators prowl here, just an invisible boundary and immediate consequences for crossing it. In a place that should be bursting with marine life, there is only silence. Not because oxygen is missing, but because too many things are present that simply shouldn't be. And maybe, just maybe, because what lives in there never truly belonged to this world at all. The dead zone where life took root, surrounded by a ring of lifeless fish and thick, Toxic brine, the color of syrup. It seemed impossible that anything could survive here. And yet, right at the edge between life and death, science uncovered something even more unbelievable. Life not only exists, it thrives. In a place with barely any oxygen, crushing pressure hundreds of times greater than at the surface, and toxin levels strong enough to rupture the cells of ordinary creatures, some beings endure. Life forms unlike anything previously catalogued. They don't breathe oxygen, don't need sunlight, and feed on methane, a gas we burn as fuel, not something any known organism should digest. Biologists call them archaeancient, single-celled microorganisms that can convert methane or hydrogen sulfide into energy. But these microbes don't live in isolation. They form the base of a self-contained food chain, supporting strange shrimp, soft-bodied tube worms, and even glowing bacterial colonies. They gather along the rim of the brine pool like it's some kind of biological oasis in a saltwater hellscape. The strangest part, remove any of these organisms from the brine, and they die instantly, as if they were born only to exist here and nowhere else. A fully independent ecosystem, thriving in conditions once thought completely uninhabitable. And if such life can grow here in a so-called death lake beneath Earth's ocean, then what might be silently enduring beneath the ice of Europa or in the deep, pressurized seas beneath Saturn's moons? What if life doesn't just find a way? What if it never needed ours to begin with? These lakes aren't just big, they're unnaturally structured. When scientists first measured the true size of certain brine pools on the ocean floor, they could hardly believe the sonar data flashing across their screens. What they were looking at was no longer just a patch of strange water. It was a vast, liquid ecosystem, structured, layered, and massive, like an alternate world sculpted in salt, deep in the Mediterranean Sea. At depths beyond 3,500 meters lie two of the most colossal and bizarre brine lakes ever discovered, l'Atalante and the Urania Basin. L'Atalante alone spans over 15 square kilometers. Its thick, oil-like water completely cut off from the seawater above. Beneath it, sediment layers have remained untouched for millions of years, forming what scientists call a living time capsule, preserving Earth's ancient chemical past. Farther southeast, in the Red Sea, Shaban Deep revealed a different kind of mystery. Its brine not only contains extreme salinity, but also shows anomalous electrical conductivity. Some readings suggest the presence of ion-rich fluids that interact strangely with surrounding magnetic fields, enough to confuse even high-end scientific instruments. No one can say for certain whether it's a natural quirk of physics or something else at work down there. Strangest of all is the structure. Some of these lakes aren't simple basins. They are layered, like underwater terraces, stacked pools, and ledges, each level containing a unique concentration of salt, gas, and microbial life. Each tier acts as its own zone of death or life, depending on which creature dares to descend. They're not pits, not miniature seas. They are bodies of liquid within a body of water, layered like catacombs, but with no ceiling, no walls, and no rock. Only fluid so dense it holds its shape, so still it defies gravity, as if the ocean learned to carve with water itself. When a lake that kills fish might also sink a ship. Not all brine pools sit still. Some simmer quietly. Others, given just a nudge from beneath, could become biological detonators for the ocean itself. One of the greatest threats from these pools isn't the salt, but what lies trapped beneath them. Methane hydrate. It's a crystalline ice that locks away methane gas under immense pressure and freezing temperatures, perfectly stable deep on the seafloor. But if that stability is disturbed by an earthquake, a landslide, or even a distant seismic wave, these hydrates can fracture, releasing vast amounts of methane in an instant. Imagine a methane bubble, tens of meters wide, rising rapidly to the surface, invisible, odorless, but within seconds, it lowers the water's density in that area. The result: any ship above it suddenly loses buoyancy and drops straight down with no time to send a signal. No warning at all. This isn't science fiction. Experimental models confirm that if the concentration of methane in seawater crosses a certain threshold, the water's lifting force collapses. Some of the mysterious disappearances in areas like the Bermuda Triangle have been linked to this very effect. No monsters, no portals, just gas. But it's not just methane. Some geologists suspect that brine lakes may be ancient gas vents, places where Earth's mantle still leaks heat, minerals, and volatile gases into the modern ocean. If true, each brine pool isn't just a biological hazard. It's a time-laced fracture where the ancient Earth quietly seeps into the present. And if one of them ever erupts, the consequences won't just be a few dead fish. It could mean the collapse of an entire marine ecosystem, not because it's alive, but because it holds the remnants of things that once were and never agreed to disappear. A time gate beneath the ocean. They're not just natural traps, not just threats to ships or whales. These deep brine pools may also be keys to glimpsing Earth's ancient past and possibly clues to life beyond this planet. At the Discovery Basin, one of the largest hypersaline lakes beneath the Mediterranean Sea, scientists drilled into the sediment beneath the brine and made a startling discovery: layers over 2 million years old, formed during a time when the Mediterranean had dried up completely and later flooded again. Inside those sediments were DNA samples from ancient microorganisms, sealed away in an unchanging environment for millions of years. These samples have since been used as model systems in the search for life on Europa, a moon of Jupiter, believed to host a hidden ocean beneath its icy crust. At the bottom of Earth's ocean lies an alien-like world, running quietly for eons. No light, no oxygen, no sky. And yet there is life. There is heat. There is an energy cycle all its own. And if that's possible here, then somewhere out there, in oceans with no names and skies we've never seen, life might also be waiting in darkness, in silence, just as it always has beneath our sea. Amid the millions of satellite scans and sonar sweeps across the ocean floor each year, there was one image that made even Google Earth fall silent. It wasn't a mountain range. It wasn't a trench. It was a perfect network of straight lines, precisely aligned, grid-like, stretching for hundreds of kilometers beneath the sea, as if someone had drawn a map by hand and buried it underwater. Strangest of all, these lines weren't distorted by terrain, didn't repeat elsewhere, and appeared exactly where the ancients once claimed Atlantis had stood. If it's not a sunken city, not a data glitch, then what exactly is lying down there? And who drew it? A strange discovery in a photo no one meant to zoom into. In 2009, Google Earth introduced a new feature called Ocean View, a 3D map that allowed users to dive beneath the ocean's surface using just a mouse and a screen. At first, it was little more than a novelty blurry, incomplete, and mostly ignored by anyone who didn't already love staring at blue nothingness between continents. Until one day, an ordinary user, not a scientist, not an engineer, zoomed in on a patch of ocean off the Canary Islands and saw something that, by all logic, should not have been there. In the middle of the sea, where only random sediment and volcanic rock were expected, appeared a perfect grid of straight lines. The lines intersected at right angles, forming what looked like city blocks or a planned urban layout. Some stretched for hundreds of kilometers in absolutely straight paths. Most astonishing of all, they weren't distorted by seafloor terrain, something that almost never happens in natural formations. The screenshot was posted to a forum, then it hit Reddit, then YouTube, then the inboxes of real researchers, and within days, the internet lit up with a single question. What is this? A buried city, a forgotten map, or something else, something that was never meant to be recorded. There were no strange sounds, no blinking lights, no seismic activity, just lines clean, sharp, deliberate, etched into the ocean floor, as if someone had drawn them with a blade. And that's where the paradox began. The more perfect it looked, the less likely it was natural. The Atlantis storm and the theories that followed. Just days after the mysterious seafloor grid image began spreading online, one ancient name resurfaced like a tidal wave: Atlantis. And it wasn't random. The location of those geometric lines just off the Canary Islands, west of the Strait of Gibraltar, aligned almost perfectly with the oldest known description of Atlantis. Over 2,300 years ago, Plato wrote that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a phrase scholars now interpret as referring to the strait itself. A powerful civilization, lost in a single day and night to earthquakes and floods, leaving no trace behind, at least until the internet started seeing lines. Those underwater right angles quickly became proposed ruins. Articles, videos, and comment threads exploded. Could this be the streets of Atlantis? Did Google accidentally expose a lost city? Are these remnants of ancient technology? Even major news outlets joined in, not confirming, but asking the kinds of questions that spark obsession. Google may have just found Atlantis. And so the theories poured in. Some believed it was a system of canals, built by an advanced civilization far ahead of its time. Others said it was archaeological evidence long hidden, only visible because satellites had, by chance, captured it before the data could be corrected. Some went further, suggesting it was the infrastructure of extraterrestrials or an ancient energy grid buried beneath the sea. Since prehistory, no one has ever dived down to confirm it. But no one seemed to need to, because simply seeing it on a screen from space was enough to make millions believe that Atlantis might be real. And that Google, in a rare moment of accidental honesty, might have revealed something history had tried very hard to forget. The official explanation and the questions no one could answer. As the Atlantis grid spread rapidly across the internet, Google was forced to respond. In a brief statement, they explained that the straight lines on the seafloor were simply the result of sonar data collection, gathered by ocean survey ships. These vessels typically move in parallel paths to map the seafloor's depth, and the traces of those paths, Google said, were what created the artificial-looking grid in the imagery. A reasonable explanation. It sounded scientific, but it didn't sit well. Almost immediately, independent researchers and skeptical users began asking the obvious follow-ups. Why do these lines only appear in specific locations? If this is a standard artifact of sonar scanning, why don't similar grids appear across other oceans that have also been surveyed? Why are the lines so perfectly rectangular with near-perfect right angles and unaffected by the underlying terrain? And more troubling, why did the grid vanish from Google Earth in later updates? If it was merely a harmless technical artifact, some data engineers pushed back. Sonar grids, they argued, are never this precise, and deep-sea bathymetric maps are usually blurred or incomplete at extreme depths. So why, of all places, did the Canary region render with such sharp, unmistakable detail? Google never commented further, but their quiet actions, especially the progressive removal of the lines in subsequent map versions, only deepened suspicion that perhaps they had revealed something that was never meant to be seen. From that moment on, the question changed. It was no longer, where did the grid come from? But why did it disappear? And more unsettling, who decided we shouldn't be allowed to see it? The grid wasn't alone, and not everyone got to see it. After the geometric grid off the Canary Islands shook the internet, amateur map hunters swarmed Google Earth like modern-day treasure seekers. They scanned every square kilometer of ocean, from the Pacific to the poles, hoping to find more. And strangely, some of them did. In distant regions near the Mariana Trench, the southern Atlantic, and even off the coast of Greenland, similar formations began to appear. Not as sharp or symmetrical as the original, but still made up of straight lines, right angles, and patterns that seemed too deliberate to be random. They appeared faint, easy to miss, but for those who had seen the Canary grid, the signature was unmistakable. The strangest part, these grids weren't stable. Some users managed to take screenshots and post them online, only for the same areas to be cleaned in the next map update. No notice, no explanation, just gone, quietly erased, as if someone didn't want them lingering, and that only fueled the fire. What if this wasn't just one grid? What if it was a buried network, a global map system beneath the sea, accidentally exposed by data glitches, and now being patched over before anyone looked too closely? People began trading coordinates, sharing methods to access older versions of Google Earth, as if playing a planet-sized game of hide-and-seek. And with that, a quiet theory took root. The grid is still there, but it only shows itself to those looking at the right time, in the right version. Not because it doesn't exist, but because not everyone is supposed to see it. If not made by humans, then who? From the moment those seafloor lines first appeared, theories of a lost civilization beneath the waves spread like a tidal wave. But as no archaeological evidence confirmed human activity in that region, a different, more unsettling question began to emerge. If it wasn't made by us, then who left it behind? A small group of geologists offered a purely scientific explanation. The lines could be remnants of an ancient tectonic fracture system, formed by geological forces millions of years ago. It's possible that ancient lava flows cooled in alignment with the Earth's magnetic field, creating long, straight fissures. The problem is geology rarely deals in right angles and perfect grids, especially on the seafloor, where chaos and collapse are the rule, not the exception. Then came the wilder theories. Some fringe researchers began referring to the grid as a signal matrix, likening it to a kind of planet-scale circuit board. To them, the structure resembled an energy conduit or receiver designed for communication or transmission, but not for human use. Others called it Earth's embedded code, a massive physical record we lacked the tools to decode. And some were more direct. If this grid wasn't built for us, And we clearly didn't build it. Maybe it belonged to someone who came before. And that's where the real fear begins. Because if some other intelligence once laid its hands on the ocean floor, long before humans even understood the idea of a map, then maybe the things we call mysteries aren't hidden because they're deep, but because they were never meant for us to understand. The limits of sight and an incomplete map. Here's a simple truth we often forget: over 80% of the ocean floor has never been mapped in detail. What we see on maps, even on Google Earth, is mostly a rough simulation, stitched together from sparse, fragmented data collected over different times and by different sources. In other words, it's a sketch, not a photograph. Those sharp, geometric lines that appear, vanish, then show up elsewhere. They might be glitches, but they might also be real features that only reveal themselves under specific conditions: the right angle, the right frequency of scan, or a fleeting moment when the ocean for just a second chooses not to hide. And if even in places we think are well mapped, we still misread, overlook, or fail to understand what we're seeing, then how many darker, deeper regions still hold grids, shapes, or signals we haven't named. Maybe the most unsettling thought isn't what lies 5,000 meters below. It's the possibility that we've passed right over it, seen it with our own eyes, and never realized what we were looking at. Deep beneath the ocean, where light cannot reach and every movement is swallowed by pressure, there are fleeting moments when the darkness is no longer complete. Not from a submersible's beam, not from the glow of passing creatures, but from a faint light, low and steady, as if the ground itself were exhaling. No one has given this phenomenon a name. No official record exists. Only a few blurry clips, a handful of disregarded accounts, and a lingering impression that the seafloor is still holding on to something it hasn't yet let go. And sometimes, that secret slips out through a single grain of sand. In light, the first sighting stories no one paid attention to. Like most ocean mysteries, it began with a story no one cared to believe. A fisherman off the coast of Kagoshima, Japan, once claimed he pulled in a net full of sand, not unusual, except this sand emitted a faint, phosphorescent glow, like powdered starlight. It clung to his hands, to the planks of the boat, and for a few quiet minutes, the entire fish hold seemed to shimmer in the night. Then, just as quickly, it stopped. The sand returned to its cold, dry gray. No footage, no samples. No one took him seriously. Years later, a sailor near Tonga described something eerily similar, a soft light in his palm as he scooped a handful of damp sand from the net, a dust-like shimmer, thin as breath, vanishing before anyone else could see it. These accounts never made the news. They didn't appear in marine research reports, but they kept repeating from Japanese waters to the South Pacific, and in quiet tales near the Galapagos. No names, no proof, only a very specific feeling that at some brief moment, a layer of sand had glowed beneath the ocean floor, and somehow that glow never wanted to be kept. Black sand and what it might be holding inside. Not all sand is the same, especially near underwater volcanic zones. Volcanic sand, the distinctive black grains formed from crushed basalt, often contains a complex mix of minerals, including olivine, pyroxene, and magnetite. These aren't ordinary minerals. They have high refractive indices, and some can reflect light intensely when exposed to sudden shifts in temperature or pressure. In laboratory conditions, Olivine has even been recorded emitting a faint glow when subjected to high heat or continuous mechanical stress. But minerals are only part of the story. In areas like the Tonga Trench, the Galapagos Rift, or near deep-sea hydrothermal vents, black sand is often coated in an ultra-thin biological film made up of heat-tolerant microorganisms, some of which are bioluminescent bacteria. These organisms don't glow constantly, but when disturbed, exposed to environmental changes, or during mass die-offs, they can emit a final burst of light, fleeting but real. The most credible hypothesis for the glowing sand phenomenon points to a cascading combination light-reflecting minerals, unstable thermal conditions beneath the seabed, and a layer of bioluminescent microbes. When a net drags across the bottom, when pressure suddenly shifts, or when sediment is stirred, the whole system can flash to life for a few seconds, then fade just as quickly, as if nothing ever happened. Not a supernatural mystery, but rather a rare collision of natural variables where sand stops being just broken rock and becomes a biological film reel, lighting up for the briefest moment before returning to silence forever. Underwater hotspots where sand isn't just sand. Not every part of the ocean floor is silent. In certain places, even at depths of thousands of meters, something hums beneath the surface: heat, movement, and at times, light. Off the coast of Sakurajima, Japan, survey vessels recorded patches of sea floor darker than surrounding areas, with temperatures elevated by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius despite no visible hydrothermal vent nearby. In the Tonga Trench, exploration teams described fine, ash-like black sand that, when stirred by submersible thrusters, emitted scattered sparks of light like embers flaring briefly, then vanishing. At the Galapagos Rift, home to one of the oldest known hydrothermal systems, sand near the vent mouths was found not only rich in heavy metallic minerals, but also coated in a thick microbial film. It was here that researchers documented non-directional luminescence, appearing briefly across the sediment's surface, only to vanish when exposed to direct lighting. Even in the Red Sea, where seafloor temperatures exceed global averages, the deepest sand layers have been described as no longer just dead sediment, but something that seems to breathe, rising and falling ever so slightly, in slow, steady pulses, as if the ocean itself still holds a heartbeat below. Here, sand is not just the ground beneath our feet. It is a final membrane stretched between humanity and the Earth's core, where the smallest disturbance might trigger light, a compressed breath, millions of years old, leaking upward through every grain. There's footage but never an answer. During a 2016 survey near Samoa, the NOAA Okeanos Explorer deep-sea submersible captured something strange, a patch of seafloor that began to shimmer gently under the ROV's light as if reflective dust was suspended in the water. The glow lasted less than a minute, then vanished the moment the camera shifted angle. No one could say for certain if it was sand. No one dared claim it was alive. Similarly, Japan's JAMSTEC research team once reported observing non-directional luminescence near a hydrothermal vent field. But when they collected sediment samples from the glowing area, all anomalies vanished. Under a microscope, the sand was just sand. No glow, no odd properties, as if the very act of removing it from the seafloor erased the phenomenon they were trying to understand. More telling, no official scientific publication has ever used the phrase black sand that glowed. There are mentions of light, optical noise, and faint reflectivity, but none clearly link the phenomenon to sand itself. In science, what can't be measured, what can't be replicated, doesn't get named. And maybe that's why this phenomenon has never been proven real. It exists in the gaps between frames of footage, in fleeting accounts, in the blur of deep-sea cameras. The data is there, but the answers aren't, and it's in that gap, the gray zone, where fact can't confirm, and doubt can't dismiss that something strange may still be glowing. Silently, just beyond the reach of science's light, light without a source or light that's been trapped. One hypothesis mentioned by mineral physicists, though rare, is the possibility of delayed phosphorescence in volcanic sand. Certain crystals, like feldspar, apatite, or unique variants of olivine, can absorb energy from their surroundings, heat, pressure, or ultraviolet light, and then release it slowly as a faint glow over time. This phenomenon, known as phosphorescence, has been observed in controlled lab conditions, but in the deep sea, under hundreds of atmospheres of pressure and uneven thermal gradients, the process may unfold in ways we still don't fully understand. Another theory suggests the glow doesn't come from something actively emitting light, but from light that has been trapped. Microscopic crystals in the sand, if arranged with the right internal lattice, could capture and hold light, much like nanomaterials known to reflect laser energy. When disturbed by a submersible, shifting currents, or even a minor tremor, those structures might release that energy chaotically, producing scattered flashes that seem to glow from within the grains themselves. A bolder theory goes further. Something beneath the sand is still glowing, but the light it emits falls outside the visible spectrum beyond what human eyes or standard cameras can detect. Only under precise refraction conditions does that buried light leak upward, briefly illuminating the sand like a whisper from below. And if that's true, then maybe the sand was never glowing at all. Maybe it's only betraying something else, something still buried, still breathing, still burning softly beneath the surface. Science has no name for it, but the locals do. While researchers debate mineral composition and possible bioluminescence, the coastal communities living alongside these waters aren't concerned with lab results. To them, this phenomenon needs no explanation because they've seen it, even if only for a moment. Fishermen in Kagoshima call it ghost sand, a light no one sees clearly. No one can capture, but anyone who touches it swears it watches back. In Polynesia, some speak of breathing sand, not because it shines steadily, but because it pulses softly, like something alive just beneath the seabed. And near the Galapagos, the name is quieter still, stardust from the deep. Not because it twinkles like stars, but because it comes and goes in an instant, like a brief greeting from somewhere far too distant to understand. No one has a formula. No one has a sample. But the stories live on, pass through warnings to newcomers, old memories, and sometimes long silences after the glow fades. And maybe, while science waits for a term precise enough to define it, these names have already spoken a truth that instruments cannot detect. The seafloor is not still. It watches. It reacts. And sometimes, it answers with a light only those who've truly been there believe is real. Beneath the ocean floor, where light is buried and the pressure can crush steel, humanity still tries to observe through the lenses of unmanned submersibles. Since the 1980s, cameras have captured fleeting, uncanny moments, objects darting upstream, indistinct shapes moving in ways that defy explanation. They last only seconds. No solid evidence. No official conclusion. And yet, a lingering feeling remains that something down there isn't just being watched, it may be watching us back. Mismatched movements and the footage that made scientists pause. It's just a camera, bolted to the body of a submersible. No emotions, no imagination, just a lens, a floodlight, and the mission to record the ocean floor. And yet, across thousands of hours of footage since the 1980s, there are moments where everything on screen doesn't align. A recording from DSV Alvin in the early 1990s shows a motion sweeping low across the seabed, moving directly against the known current. No tail movement, no water trail. And when slowed down, it appears only as a blurry, shapeless mass traveling faster than any known creature at that depth. During a 2001 expedition, ROV Jason captured something rotating off-axis, unaffected by the surrounding flow. Analysts called it a small, unidentified object, which is a polite way of saying we have no idea what it is. More notably, in several NOAA Oceanos Explorer live streams from 2016 to 2020, viewers pointed out shadow-like streaks gliding across the lens fast, silent, and often appearing just as the vehicle slowed or paused. These movements matched no known organisms, nor did they fit the direction of light or water flow. Most were later written off as debris, air bubbles, or tiny marine life like copepods. Others were discarded for being too blurry or lacking enough data. But one strange detail remains: they didn't just move the wrong way. They showed up precisely when the camera stopped moving, as if something noticed it was being watched and decided to step into the frame. Just for a few seconds, then vanished. The 2016 live stream when NOAA's lens captured something no one could name. On July 25, 2016, NOAA's Oceanos Explorer was live streaming another routine dive. The ROV Deep Discoverer glided steadily across a flat, uneventful stretch of seabed. No complex terrain, minimal current, stable lighting. And then, an object shot across the screen. It didn't glow. It had no fins. It didn't drift with the current. Instead of floating by, it made an abrupt change in direction, disappearing from view in a split second. It moved against gravity, untouched by drag, as if the crushing pressure of the deep sea simply didn't apply to it. The livestream chat exploded. Viewers clipped the moment, reposted it to Reddit, YouTube, and mystery forums across the web. Some dubbed it a fast flyer. Others joked, "That thing knows the camera's on." NOAA later issued a brief explanation, possibly back-current debris, or a microscopic organism reflecting light. There was no deeper analysis. The clip was not re-released with annotations, yet seasoned video analysts pointed out there was no motion blur, and the object's light reflection did not match the submersible's lamp angle. The water around it showed no disturbance, no shadow, no ripple, no particle impact. Moments later, the ROV resumed its path. Everything returned to normal, but the footage remains resurfacing year after year, watched in slow motion, frame by frame, by viewers still asking the same question. Not because the image is too vague, but because it's far too clear for what it claims to be when even light betrays the eye. In the deep ocean, light isn't just swallowed, it's bent. And that means everything a camera captures down there could be a carefully crafted lie. Crushing pressure, temperature gradients, and uneven salinity create a shifting, liquid lens beneath the sea, a place where illumination doesn't move in straight lines. Light from submersible lamps can refract, scatter, or even generate phantom shadows and double images that don't truly exist. This phenomenon is known as underwater ghost imaging, when a camera records the reflected light from a real creature, but that light is distorted and projected elsewhere in the frame. The result? A second, fake image, a ghost, not from a broken camera, but from the ocean's own sleight of hand, near hydrothermal vents and thermal seeps. Heat gradients can cause even more chaos. Light flickers subtly, making stationary objects seem to tremble or pulse. In some ROV Hercules footage, researchers initially believed they had discovered a new species, only to realize they were watching their own submersible's side, distorted by alternating hot and cold water layers. But here's the problem. Not all strange footage can be blamed on light. Some objects remain crisp. Their reflections align perfectly. Their motion defies the known flow of water, which means the deep sea doesn't always betray the eye. Sometimes it chooses not to, so that what you see looks just real enough to believe when familiar creatures act unfamiliar. What makes submersible footage so puzzling isn't always the unidentified objects. Sometimes it's the known creatures, the ones with names that appear in the wrong place, moving in the wrong way. Tiny organisms like marine snow can occasionally be pulled upstream by vortex currents, giving the illusion that they're steering themselves, as if some curious intelligence were silently trailing the sub. Species like larvaceans or worm larvae can shoot off in unpredictable directions, making their movement look illogical or intentional if there's no frame of reference. But the most remarkable case involves the siphonophore, a thread-like, translucent creature that glides slowly under artificial light. In one clip, the entire research crew paused, uncertain what they were watching. Only after close review did an expert confirm it's a siphonophore, but its size and movement have never been recorded before. The mystery wasn't about discovering something new. It was about witnessing known creatures behaving in ways science hadn't yet prepared for, and maybe in ways that suggest they were watching us too. When scientific language falls silent, not every strange image from the ocean floor can be written off as microfauna, suspended debris, or refracted light. Some segments of footage remain as unresolved questions, drifting amid thousands of hours recorded under hundreds of atmospheres of pressure, and to this day, no one has truly answered them. In a 2014 recording, one object darts across the screen at a speed that leaves no shadow, no turbulence, no light distortion, and most strikingly, it shows no deceleration in water. When played at ultra-slow speed, it appears only as a gray blur, no fins, no symmetry, no clear light reflection. NOAA issued no formal statement. Placing it under the label requires further analysis. Other movements are harder to explain: objects that spin, then jolt backward along a tilted axis, exiting the frame as if unaffected by water resistance or deep-sea pressure. The surrounding current remains undisturbed. Nearby fish do not react. One such clip surfaced in a 2017 submersible dive in the Eastern Pacific, a clip which, notably, was never re-aired in any official release. Researchers often respond with a familiar phrase: insufficient data for classification. No one claims intelligent life, no one asserts paranormal activity, but no one dares say, "We know what that was." Because some movements exist outside the vocabulary of both physics and biology, and until clearer data emerges, those images remain in the same folder, unexplained. So what exactly slipped into the frame? Some scientists suggest that the strange visuals captured by submersibles may be unclassified organisms glimpsed only briefly, lacking sufficient data for formal identification. Others lean toward the idea of nano-debris, synthetic particles so small and lightweight that they drift erratically, influenced by static charges or asymmetrical shapes. More cautious technical experts point to sensor interference, where under intense pressure and artificial lighting, cameras might misinterpret input and produce distorted images. But beyond all these theories lies a simpler truth. We're observing a world that follows a logic completely unlike our own. At those depths, nothing behaves the way we expect, not light, not currents, not even the materials themselves. And in that strangeness, one question repeats itself: if there is something down there, and it knows we're watching, will it hide from the lens? Or is it simply waiting for the right moment to stare back? There is no Delta station in any naval archive, no official designation, no recovery coordinates, not a single line in any final report. And yet, strangely, the name keeps surfacing, scattered like fragments of a memory leak in old engineering logs, garbled radio tapes, or the hazy recollections of those who once lived inside deep-sea modules. It's not clear enough to be called evidence, but not vague enough to dismiss as fiction. It feels as if someone removed it from history, but forgot to clean up every trace. And over time, those traces began to form a shape, not the shape of an official outpost, but of something that once existed and was left behind: the experimental age beneath the ocean. The 1960s weren't just the age of spacecraft, they were also the era of dreams that plunged downward. While NASA reached for the skies, the U.S. Navy and scientists turned their gaze toward the ocean floor, where they believed humanity's first colonies might one day take root just beneath the surface. Sealab I-2 and the deep-sea experimental stations deployed off the coast of California were bold steps toward having humans live for weeks under crushing pressure, in environments lacking oxygen, light, and sometimes even a safe way back. Not just the U.S. Canada joined the race with the benthos habitat, and NOAA launched Hydrolab in the Caribbean. From the outside, these were just cylindrical metal containers clinging to the seafloor like sunken satellites. But inside, scientists lived and worked recording biological and environmental data and testing how long the human body could endure such extremes. Then, the momentum suddenly slowed. A tragic accident during Sealab 3 claimed the life of an aquanaut. Budgets were slashed, enthusiasm cooled, and the modules, instead of being carefully recovered, many were simply left behind. Some were hauled back up, others weren't. In many documents, they're marked only with vague notes, suspended, or current location unknown. No one publicly used the word lost, but no one did an inventory either. And like all things abandoned beneath the sea, once they go still in the darkness, they become blank spots in our collective memory. Except, some of them may not have stayed silent. Where the name Delta might have come from. No map, no technical log, and no military declassified record has ever officially referred to a station Delta. Among all known deep-sea habitat projects, no base carried that name, at least. Not on paper. And yet, the name continues to appear not in peer-reviewed documents, but in fragments of oral testimony, passing rumors, and annotations no one remembers writing. A Sealab 2 internal report once mentioned a secondary module temporarily labeled D, short for the fourth test group. A Benthos engineer claimed he'd personally painted the word Delta on the side of a test unit to distinguish it, but never included the label in any formal paperwork because, as he put it, there was no need. In the rushed climate of the 1960s, when modules were constantly assembled, submerged, abandoned, or reconfigured, the idea of an unofficial name quietly persisting in the background feels entirely plausible. Delta may not have come from an organization. It may have come from the mouths of those who lived inside it. A nickname passed around to tell it apart from the others. A casual label, a handwritten word that made something real to its crew, even if no system ever acknowledged it. Or if you lean into the more unsettling theory, Delta was the name of a module that was never supposed to exist, one that wasn't approved, wasn't logged, and didn't follow protocol. A leak from a project that never officially happened. And if that's true, the unsettling part isn't that no one wrote it down. It's that it might still be down there, but no one dares say its name out loud anymore. The signal that shouldn't exist. In the late 1980s, a team of Navy technicians scanning sonar frequencies off the coast of San Diego, an area once used for Sealab 3 trials, detected a strange signal, a repeating ping, transmitted at precise intervals of 17 minutes and 42 seconds. It didn't match any known marine life or correspond to any standard equipment profiles in their database. The waveform, frequency, and stability led them to conclude this was a programmed transmission, almost certainly artificial. But the details were even stranger. The source originated over 200 meters deep, in a region still marked as not recommended for access due to the Sealab accident. A NOAA engineer later confirmed, "We've picked up this same heartbeat ping from that location at least 3 times over more than a decade. Whatever's broadcasting isn't on any approved deployment list." When the team requested a submersible be sent to investigate, the response came back: unnecessary, likely debris, interference. But several members weren't convinced. To them, it felt eerily consistent, like a forgotten deep-sea module still running silent, periodically sending status checks into the void, unaware that the people meant to receive them had left the conversation decades ago. If what they heard truly came from an automated device continuing its transmission cycle after all this time, then the question isn't just what it is, but rather, why has no one ever gone to turn it off? Or worse, is someone still listening on the other end? A region forgotten or hidden. Off the coast of San Diego, near the former Sealab 3 testing grounds, lies an elliptical zone spanning several square kilometers. Since the early 1970s, many civilian nautical charts have marked it as not recommended for approach. The official explanation: unstable geology, risk of seabed collapse, unsuitable for anchoring or long-term study. But independent researchers, using modern equipment to scan the area, have reported something far more unsettling: erratic sonar interference, abnormal magnetic fluctuations, and in some cases, navigation instruments drifting inexplicably off course. A team of commercial divers hired to survey the seafloor for a nearby infrastructure project cut their dive short after all members reported a shared sensation being watched. No cameras were found, no radar pings, no thermal source. Yet everyone agreed something or someone was down there. One diver later described it this way: "It didn't feel like we were the first people to be there. Everything was too quiet, too neat, like something had been living there for a long time and was still watching." A marine geophysicist from the University of Washington reviewed the anomalies and stated they couldn't be explained by volcanic activity or tectonic motion. And if some kind of equipment is still transmitting from that depth, it's not modern. It's something that's been lying dormant for decades. The real question isn't whether a device is there, it's this: if Station Delta was never officially recorded, then who marked this ocean region as off-limits, and what did they know that we were never meant to find out? Stories with nowhere to return to. When every official record falls silent, the real clues often hide in the hazy memories of people no one thought to ask. In a rare interview, a former engineer from the Benthos project recalled, "We once installed a secondary module about the size of a small truck to monitor sea-floor pressure in a test zone. But after that expedition, no one ever mentioned recovering it. There was no dismantling schedule. No one called us back." He wasn't sure if the module still functioned, but he remembered clearly it could operate autonomously for at least 12 years. A Navy sonar technician from the 1990s shared a stranger account. There was this signal, steady and regular. Every 17 minutes, exactly, it pinged. I reported it. The officer on duty stared at the screen for a few seconds, then said, "Log it once and move on." No further monitoring needed. When he asked why, the answer came back: because it doesn't exist in the records. Neither of them ever used the word Delta, but stories like these, scattered, seemingly unrelated when pieced together, begin to form a strange pattern. A device beneath the sea, absent from logs, never retrieved, yet still transmitting on schedule, as if still waiting for someone to answer. And when enough people report encountering it in different places, at different times, a question inevitably surfaces. Maybe there was never a station called Delta, but rather something or someone that's always been there, just never called by the right name. A station that doesn't exist, but never fell silent. If Station Delta ever existed, it left behind no traceable records, no packing manifest, no equipment code, no dismantling order. And perhaps that's what makes it the perfect symbol of a certain kind of industrial memory, something that was once built, once deployed, then quietly abandoned, but never truly powered down. The idea of a seafloor module, still emitting regular signals decades later, is no longer far-fetched, especially in an age when autonomous devices can operate for years without human input. What makes it frightening isn't the persistence of its function. It's the absence of ownership. No one claims it. No one inspects it. And seemingly, no one is allowed to speak about it directly. It doesn't feel like a mishap, nor like a classified military cover-up. It feels like a question that was never permitted to be asked, and therefore never pursued for an answer. But the ocean doesn't bury everything. The signal still pulses, the interference still lingers, and the sense remains that somewhere on the seafloor, something has opened its eyes, and no one knows who it's waiting for. Not all parts of the deep sea are completely silent. There are places where sound seems to be held, then released again softly, rhythmically, as if whispering back to the ocean itself. Not fish, not earthquakes, just long, drawn-out sounds, low rumbles, faint howls, or something like speech smothered underwater that hydroacoustic equipment has been recording for decades. Some of the most famous have been named the Bloop, Upsweep, Julia, but there's another name, unofficial, quietly passed between divers, acoustic researchers, and those who've heard it for themselves, the Murmuring Shelf, a stretch of seafloor no one has ever found, but whose voice keeps echoing, sounds no one invited and no one can name. In 1997, somewhere in the uninhabited waters of the southern Pacific Ocean, NOAA's hydrophone stations suddenly recorded a sound so loud it shook the entire system. That sound, deep, stretched out, and powerful enough to be heard from thousands of kilometers away, was given a nickname, the bloop. At first, some speculated it came from a massive, unknown creature. Later, scientists leaned toward an explanation involving Antarctic ice breaking, but that theory never quite erased the lingering discomfort the recording left behind. Less than 2 years later, another sound emerged, stranger, softer, like someone trying to speak but being muffled. It was named Julia, and since 1991, a recurring seasonal sound known as upsweep has kept echoing through the records. Its origin still unclear. No one called for these sounds. No one waited for them. Yet somehow, they found their way to human ears and left behind a persistent question. What is speaking from the ocean floor? And why doesn't it want to stop? When there's no map, people name what they feel. No one can point to the murmuring shelf on a map. There are no coordinates, no topographic data, not even proof that it truly exists. And yet, the name Murmuring Shelf keeps resurfacing in quiet conversations among divers, sonar technicians, and those familiar with the strange sounds that rise from the deep. It didn't begin as a legend. It started with recordings. Hydrophones strung across the Pacific often captured faint, prolonged tones, whispers, almost echoing like distant human speech. Stranger still, they often seemed to come from the same vague zone, a patch of ocean where sonar signals suddenly go eerily silent. Not a restricted zone, not a Bermuda Triangle, just an acoustic void in the heart of the sea. No one's found a literal shelf, but the sound, steady, rhythmic, as if bouncing off some unseen underwater cliff, makes it hard not to imagine maybe there was a wall, or maybe it's still there. Something you can't see, but you can hear, and possibly something that's trying to whisper back. Theories that make sense and still feel wrong. All humanity has ever gathered from the so-called murmuring shelf are elongated sound recordings and their wave analyses. No images, no confirmed source. And so, scientists have turned to explanations they can at least test. The first hypothesis came from marine physicists, the thermocline phenomenon, a boundary where warm and cold water layers meet, creating a natural sound-reflecting barrier. If a sound enters this layer, it can become trapped and travel thousands of kilometers without weakening. A perfect explanation, except for one unsettling detail: why does this sound only emerge from one specific region? The second theory, a hollow sea floor, or more accurately, a domed geological formation that acts like a natural resonance chamber, amplifying minor tectonic activity into large, echoing pulses. Physically sound. Yes, but it doesn't explain the rhythmic repetition. These aren't random earthquakes. The pattern is too steady. Finally, some geologists propose that the sounds result from collisions between submerged ice and volcanic ridges, creating warped acoustic bursts as the energy passes through deep water layers. Mechanically plausible, but still, no one listens to the recordings without feeling a chill. Even after processing, even after removing background noise, even when reduced to just a waveform, it still feels like something is whispering to you. Not an echo, not an animal, but the distinct sense that you're being listened to and someone is whispering back. The stories of those who don't believe in coincidence. Not everything gets recorded. Not every anomaly ends up in a report, but there's another layer of data, unofficial, unpublished, that comes from the people who work closest with the deep-sea listening equipment. One sonar technician recalled a midnight shift when he heard a series of broken-up sounds, like someone whispering no clear language, no decipherable words, just human-like. In another case, an acoustic specialist stationed at a monitoring base near Guam reported hearing a long, lullaby-like hum, as soft as breath, and yet, when she hit record, there was nothing. The sound, it seemed, could only be perceived by the human ear. None of them claimed it was a creature. No one mentioned mermaids, entities, or any wild speculation without proof. But nearly all of them shared something strange in common. They remembered the sound clearly, not vaguely, not dreamlike, as if something had deliberately delivered a phrase, a rhythm, or a distinct presence, one that machines simply couldn't hold on to. When asked what it was, they all gave some version of the same answer. I don't know what it was. I just know, when I heard it, I was sure I wasn't alone. What makes a nameless rock tell stories? Imagine you're adrift in the middle of the ocean, just night and waves. Suddenly, a sound emerges. Not words, but something with cadence, with pauses, with the uncanny feeling that it's waiting for a reply. Not just a noise, but the sensation of being spoken to. So is it possible that a seafloor formation, just rock, no life could somehow produce such a sound? One compelling hypothesis suggests that it might be a long, submerged cliff or a series of stone shelves buried beneath layers of sediment, acting like the resonating chamber of a musical instrument. As waves crash and currents shift with the tides, the air pockets within these hidden structures could create harmonics, natural, cyclical sounds that feel intentional. This kind of geological resonance isn't new. Caves on land have been known to whistle when wind passes through, producing eerie howls or droning tones. But what makes the murmuring shelf so unusual is that no known coordinates match any undersea shelf structure capable of doing the same thing, at least not in the regions where the strange audio has been recorded. Which leads to the next question: where is it? And if we can't find it, then what exactly is making us feel like we did? Maybe it's nothing more than a collapsed ridge or a complex deep-sea trench we've yet to map. But then again, just maybe the murmuring shelf isn't a location at all. Maybe it's a repeating behavior of sound, emitted by something still moving somewhere far below the ocean floor. Not quite alive, but not entirely stone either. If what's whispering isn't stone, then what lies behind it? Maybe we've been looking in the wrong direction. Maybe the murmuring shelf isn't a place at all but a doorway, a disguise, a thin partition between us and something not quite ready to be seen. Because if those sounds are steady, rhythmic, and not natural, what's more unsettling is the possibility that they were designed to sound natural. One researcher once proposed that the seabed in certain regions might contain hollow pockets or geological layers structured in a way that hides sound signals, distorting sonar, redirecting acoustic traces. Not because the waves can't reach the source, but because they're being led elsewhere. And if that's true, if what we thought was solid ground is what's bending every attempt to approach, then what we're really looking for may lie beneath that layer. An ancient air chamber, an undocumented geologic vault, or perhaps an artificial structure. No one knows, no one dares say for sure. But if any of it is real, then the scariest question isn't what's making the sound. It's why does it keep broadcasting, and why do we keep hearing it? As if it's a message never meant for us yet, we keep picking it up by accident. And somewhere deep below the seabed, Someone or something is quietly watching to see whether we'll ever realize we're not the intended audience. Beneath the deep sea, where light cannot reach and fire cannot exist, there is something that makes metal melt like wax under heat. No one calls it burning in the usual sense, but when steel nets are hauled back up, all that remains are twisted fragments, shattered as if they had survived a silent explosion. There are no official coordinates, no recorded footage, only baffling damage reports and whispers among sailors. There's a stretch of water that can incinerate without heat, a chemical reaction triggered by methane gas, ultra-concentrated acid, or traces of an ecosystem humans were never meant to disturb. If a net can quietly dissolve into nothing, what's waiting down there? That could do the same to a sub. The net that burned a nameless tale. Like many deep-sea mysteries, it began without coordinates, without evidence, just a hurried story exchanged between fishing runs. A vessel had lowered its net along the edge of a deep trench, a place where there was supposedly nothing but silence and pressure. The net descended as usual, like it had 1,000 times before. But when they pulled it back up, it was no longer a net. The once taut steel cables had twisted and unraveled, warped as if half melted and then frozen mid-collapse. Some sections crumbled like fine sand. The joints were hollowed out, as if corroded from the inside. No one filmed it. No one filed an official report. But the tale didn't stay with just one boat. On diver forums, at dockside bars, people started murmuring about a hot zone, a stretch of sea where metal dissolves without fire, where fishing gear becomes a sacrifice to a reaction no eye has ever seen. And like all true mysteries, it endures precisely because no one has been able to disprove it. Truth below the surface, brine pools and hydrothermal vents. Not every patch of the seafloor is the same. In certain regions, when a submersible drifts through, the instruments start blinking with warnings no one can immediately explain. These are the so-called lakes within the sea pockets of hypersaline water so dense they appear to form their own distinct surface, a mirrored sheet suspended inside the ocean itself. But these pools aren't just salty, they're laced with methane, hydrogen sulfide, and even sulfuric acid compounds capable of softening steel in minutes upon direct contact. In places like Tonga, the Galapagos, and the Red Sea, scientists have recorded hydrothermal vents reaching temperatures up to 400 degrees. But more alarming are the brine pockets beside them, utterly silent, invisible, and lacking any boiling or glow, yet containing corrosive power near the theoretical maximum. Any instrument not specifically reinforced for such an environment risks disintegration from the inside out. Some of the lost net incidents are believed to have occurred near these zones. While no one has dared confirm it outright, one theory has quietly emerged. Perhaps the net wasn't burned in any way humans understand, but rather dissolved, like sugar in acid. And when you pull it back up, all that remains is a warped trace of its former shape and a flood of unanswered questions. Fire without flame, when chemistry creates an illusion. Some things look burned, yet never catch fire. Deep in the ocean, where pressure crushes steel and temperatures soar past 400 degrees, hydrothermal vents operate like nature's own reactors. Fluids here don't boil or evaporate. Instead, they surge like streams of metallic acid, dense, scorching, and almost impervious to light. In this environment, anything man-made turns oddly fragile. Within seconds of contact with a mixture of sulfur and chloride, iron begins to rust. Alloys disintegrate. and molecular structures unravel. A steel net, once thought durable, can oxidize from the inside, releasing heat and streams of tiny bubbles, as if each strand of metal were peeling away like rotted paper. Fishermen on the surface don't witness this. They only see the aftermath nets hauled up, looking as if they've been through flames, wire limp like overcooked noodles, welds swollen as if blistered. There's no smoke, no spark, and yet they use a single word, burned. That misunderstanding isn't born from fantasy. It's because in the ocean, some reactions need no flame to undo the world we built. And when familiar definitions no longer apply, it is the seafloor itself that begins to rewrite our language. When the strongest becomes the most fragile. Steal a word that conjures strength, resilience, and near invincibility, but on the ocean floor, especially near hydrothermal vents or methane pockets, steel is not a warrior. It's a victim. Low-carbon steel, commonly used in fishing nets, has a structure highly vulnerable to natural corrosive agents, especially if it's not galvanized or coated with anti-oxidizing layers. A single strike from a plume of super-concentrated sulfur or a patch of methane-laced mud can trigger an almost instant reaction. Natural acids hollow out the core, release gas, create strings of tiny bubbles, and fracture the metal with hairline cracks like rice paper splitting in hot water. From the surface, the wire net looks like it's burning, but what's really happening is a scentless, colorless, soundless chemical breakdown. There's a bitter irony in this. The tool fishermen trust the most, forged by earth, fire, and human engineering can crumble in seconds before a single drop of deep-sea acid. And what's even stranger, it doesn't happen everywhere. Some waters destroy steel in minutes, while just a few hundred meters away, metal returns to the surface untouched, as if the ocean is choosing what gets to come back and what never will. Heat that doesn't come from fire. After the stories of melting nets, warped hulls, and robotic arms crumbling under a strange crust began to surface, people started to realize something down there wasn't just silently watching it, was quietly pushing back. Not with brute force, but with corrosion so rapid that even seasoned technicians took a few steps back. A seismic monitoring station installed near a hydrate field off the coast of Newfoundland lost signal exactly 5 hours and 42 minutes after deployment. When retrieved, its metal frame had turned a scorched bronze. The welds had split apart, and the internal cables snapped like dry crackers. No one saw flames, but everyone felt the aftermath. And near the axial seamount in the Pacific, remote-controlled divers recorded the frame of an observation rig submerged in hypersaline water, where every exposed metal surface bubbled gently as if being slowly boiled from the inside out. Scientific reports describe these events in dry language equipment failed to meet operational standards. Interference due to unidentified chemical reactions. But piece them together, and you get an unspoken narrative of a formidable phenomenon, where water doesn't need to boil to make machines fall apart. No one has dared give it a name, because no one fully understands it yet. But for those who have placed equipment on the ocean floor, there's a quiet consensus in some corners of the sea. Nothing catches fire, yet everything burns from. If it's not natural, then what is it? When every chemical equation checks out on paper, yet equipment still melts like wax, people begin looking beyond the lab for explanations. Some researchers have posed the question, could the ocean floor conceal naturally radioactive pockets that remain unmapped? areas where the Earth's crust is thinner, allowing traces of heavy elements or unusual radiation to seep through, not enough to cause explosions, but just enough to weaken metal structures over time. Others lean toward biological theories, extremophile bacteria capable of intense corrosion, thriving near hydrothermal vents, where they convert sulfur or methane into acid. Such organisms have been known to attach to ship hulls and damage survey equipment in just a matter of days. Yet, to this day, no complete specimen has been isolated for full analysis. And more quietly still, there lingers suspicion about chemical waste dumped into the ocean during the 1970s to 1990s, back when environmental laws were far more lenient. Industrial barrels sunk deep into the abyss, reacting slowly in the dark, creating dead zones, places where no life appears. And equipment only works once. No one has a definitive answer. But among deep-sea surveyors, caution is no longer optional. Because if a net can catch fire just by brushing through a certain patch of water, then the ocean is not merely uncharted. It's where the boundary between the natural and the man-made grows increasingly blurred.